Today, my guest at NEAF 2026, our Air Force pilot, author of several books, Tony Poston, also naval fighter pilot and veteran of space shuttle missions, Hoot Gibson. Thanks for joining us today after your wonderful talk that you had yesterday. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was, Hoot and Tony, was that Hoot, you had a long time that you were considering writing a book. And it was many years before you did. And Tony somehow talked you into doing it. How'd that all happen?
Well,
torture.
It's true. Yeah.
Human torture.
Yeah. Needling and
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a little fake, so let's fake this part.
Well, for years, I've been told, when are you going to write your book? And I have to confess, one big thing that was holding me back is, oh no, another astronaut wants to tell us his life story. And that really put a damper on my eagerness to do it. But I frequently heard, okay, I understand what you're saying, but you have a unique story. I do have a little bit of a unique story. And so this went on for many, many years, and it wasn't until I got to work with Tony on a children's book, First Flight, that after the book was out and published, Tony said, okay, this is great, you did a children's book. Now when are you going to do your book? And I launched off into my same excuse, saying, yeah, I know I need to do that. And he said, you've been saying that for 25 years. How about now? So he got me off square one, and so finally did put it together.
Right. So you're very convincing person. You can convince people.
Again, it goes back to human torture. No, I'm kidding. The hardest part of writing a book is getting past the mental hurdle of, oh, it's a big project, right? I mean, it's a lot of writing, and it's like, I don't want to do that. And how do I take the time, and where do I start? And it's all the all the roadblocks you put up in your own mind. So my approach has always been, let's get down to bite-sized pieces and then attack it that way. So I would always tell my authors, here, just give me a list of everything in a perfect world. What would this book contain? And just make a list, a random list. Don't put it in order, just give me a random list. And then after we had a list, we massage it and put in some structure, and then I would say, okay, if you had to get up tomorrow without any preparation, any notes, whatever, what is the easiest thing for you to talk about tomorrow, just off the cuff? And they'd say, well, that topic. Then write that one first, because that's the easiest, right? Let's start easy. Let's go easy first, and work our way inside out. So that's how we approached it. And
that's right. He first told me, okay, give me a list of all the topics that you could talk on right now without any additional preparation, no order. And then after that, he said, okay, now, I sent that list to him. Then he said, okay, now put those in some sort of order, whatever you want, chronological, whatever. And about the time I was finishing doing that, I called him and I said, you tricked me. Because what you tricked me into doing was writing the outline for my book. And that's how it went. And then he said, okay, pick one of them that you feel like writing about. And so that's how we got there. So I wrote that one, and he said, okay, this is very good. It needs a little editing, but that's a good start. And what are you going to write next? And so then it was relentless. Okay, when are you going to send me another chapter? When are you going to send me 2 more chapters? So,
yeah, and for me, it's more important that people write. It's not about if it's good or not. We'll make it good later, right? So we'll refabricate, reword it, and with whose case, I would take what he wrote and modify it and, rewrite it and so on and so forth. But it's still his story, it's still his words, basically. But the reality is, at the beginning, I don't care if it's any good. I just want writing, because that's the hardest part, getting into a writing mode. And once you've had some success, once you've gotten 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters down, you're starting to see something now. It's tangible, it's real. It's like, wow, maybe I can finish this. And then it gives you more motivation to finish it and complete it.
Sounds a little more like massaging than torture, though.
Well, psychological torture.
Psychological
a lot of
torture.
psychological torture.
Yeah. No, I think it was more like torture.
Well, I thought what was really cool about your talk yesterday here at NEAF 2026 was that you talked about the human side of what you do.
That's my fault.
It is, yeah. It's all
That's
your
totally
fault?
my fault, because I know Hoot well enough to know that if I were to give Hoot a technical topic to talk about, something about an aircraft, specifically about a certain aircraft, or something related to flying of any type, he would go on this long 20, 30-minute rant about it, right? So my point is I wanted to catch him off guard and make him think a little bit about something he usually doesn't think about, the humanity side of space flight.
Did it work? Did it work, Hoot?
Yeah, oh, it worked. It worked fine. I had to think. I had to think on my feet. And supposedly, as a jet fighter pilot and an astronaut, you had to learn how to think on your feet. And so it was interesting. Tony had not shown me the questions ahead of time, and so I didn't know what to expect, but right away I figured it out. He wasn't going to give me something like, tell me how the space shuttle flies re-entry. You know, I could have launched off into 30 minutes on that.
Yes.
But we didn't want that.
We didn't want that.
We didn't want that.
Yeah, and I thought really I think maybe your first or one of your first questions about the human side of like launching or taking an aircraft, and doing something that, is not ordinary in an aircraft. And you tell us a little about your feelings, like, what's it feel like to be sitting on the launch pad compared to like, okay, I'm going to take this thing to Mach 9 or something like that.
Well, yeah, you frequently get the question as an astronaut, when you were sitting there on the launch pad, weren't you scared? And the answer was no. I was never scared. I was apprehensive, certainly, because there are certain malfunctions that happen, and we have to solve them during launch within 10 seconds. And if you haven't solved it by then, you've got to engage the backup computer, because if you've got a navigation error and it's allowed to propagate for 10 seconds, see, there I go.
See?
It's allowed to propagate
Exactly
for
what
10
happens.
seconds.
Hoot, it's okay.
But
Even Tony says,
I guess we're at Andy's safe space here,
yeah. Anyway, that's an example of wasn't scared, but you are apprehensive, because if something goes wrong, you've got to get on it and fix it right away.
Right.
You don't have time to mess around. So I was never thinking I'm going to die on this mission. You never had that thought. And
except for STS-27.
Except for STS-27.
Well, we'll talk about during
the re-entry. Yeah, but anyway, so
yeah.
So
yeah.
But it was an interesting set of topics that Tony had for us to talk about.
Right.
I got to be honest. Hoot surprised me, because, I had a lot more questions than what we actually got through, and I was a little nervous on some of these questions. I thought Hoot might I say, Hoot, so tell me how you felt on this. Yes.
I was
okay. He was just going to stop and or just give me a really short answer, right? And then, okay, next question, right? So yeah, he surprised me that he was able to talk at length about some of these questions, which is great.
Yeah.
But I actually had more questions than I needed.
Yeah. Well, that's really good when you do an interview. You don't want to run out of questions.
Right. Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah. But when I've talked to other astronauts, it sounds like the same thing that you're saying that they said, is that basically it's the astronaut's prayer, right? You don't want to mess up. You're not worried about dying. You're worried about messing up more than anything?
Well, yeah. The astronaut's motto is better dead than look bad, and so yeah, you don't want to mess it up. And like I talked about, starting the auxiliary power units, that was time critical, and if you mess that up, you're going to delay the launch. And so nobody wanted to do that. Nobody wanted to have that on their record.
Right. He had also mentioned too, and I thought this was really interesting, and I think you said something like, where do I start? But what would you improve on the shuttle, space shuttle? And I know there are lots of things to talk about, but I thought it was very interesting. What would you do to change the space shuttle if you're still going to use it today?
Well, you probably remember what I said was, I'd put a longer nose gear on it. That would help with the loads on the wheels and brakes and tires on touchdown. But the big thing that came to my mind as I was talking about that, wait a minute, there was something even bigger than that. And that was, we should have had an escape pod. We should have had every other manned rocket that we had an escape system, an escape rocket that would pull the capsule away and deploy parachutes and save the astronauts. We never had that in the space shuttle. And obviously that cost us 2 crews lives, Challenger and Columbia.
Right.
And that would be a big thing that we should have done.
And that's kind of how I wanted to go into STS-27. And lots of people have said the same thing. There's no real escape route. I think you even said that the Russians were we thought this was kind of crazy that we built the aircraft, the spacecraft that didn't have an escape system in it.
That's true. The Russians told us they couldn't believe that we were going to launch people in a vehicle that didn't have an escape system. Now, you mentioned STS-27. If we had had a burn-through on STS-27, we probably would have disintegrated at about 17 times the speed of sound, Mach 17 and 200,000 feet. An ejection seat isn't going to save you. An escape pod would have to have thermal protection, heat protection as well. So designing and building something that would be able to handle that is
It'd be easier on launch.
it'd be easier on
Right,
launch.
right, because you don't have the temperature, friction, and
But
temperature.
during reentry, it'd be hard to design an escape capsule that could save the crew.
Right.
And so I think that was part of the problem. Well, part of the problem was, I think NASA looked at it and said, it's too difficult. We can't do it. Well, maybe we should have tried harder.
Do you agree that the capsule is the safer way to go than a reusable flying machine?
Well,
What do you think?
not really. No, because I knew one of the original engineers who first went to work for NASA on the Space Task Group, dear friend of mine for 28 years, and he was a parachute expert. Parachutes can be very unforgiving as well. And so a capsule that's going to come down and land under a parachute, NASA in some of their testing for the X-38, which we were going to build and never built, but some of the testing for that exposed how they had a total parachute failure on the first drop test of an article that was going to simulate the X-38. And it was a minor strap that was flapping around. Well, when you get the tension in those cables and in the lines, the shroud lines to the parachute, you hit it with anything, you're going to break that cable because it's under so much stress. And so parachutes are very unforgiving. So
there are other risks involved.
I don't know that we're better off with capsules and parachutes.
Well, if you remember in Apollo 15, one of the 3 chutes didn't deploy, and they hit hard on the water, and if a second chute had failed, they would have died probably because the impact would have been too hard.
Right.
Surface.
It's still very risky. Yeah.
Right. It was
Even with
said,
3 chutes, even with 2 chutes, they couldn't. They barely landed safely. So
yeah, it was said we could tolerate 1 chute out, but
Right.
not 2.
But not two.
Not 2.
Yep.
And with STS-27, I've interviewed other astronauts on that same flight, but I didn't ask. All I did was ask them, did you ever feel that your life was in danger? And every one of them that was on that flight that I interviewed said STS-27. They didn't say any other flights. So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what happened during launch and why everybody thought their life was in danger?
Mission Control called us the day after launch and told us, hey guys, we saw something hit your right wing during launch. We want you to take the robot arm, we had the robot arm on that mission, and look at your right wing and tell us what you see. So we had to lift the arm up, swing it out from the left longeron over to the right wing, and then down and pointing back at the wing. And I'll never forget when we brought up the image from the end effector camera that's on the arm. We brought up the image in the cockpit, and I looked at it and I could see right away we had a lot of tile damage. And I said to myself, we are going to die. Now, I wasn't really serious about that, but I said, that's how serious it looked. That's how bad it looked. And called Mission Control and said, hey, Mission Control, Houston, we're seeing a lot of tile damage on the right wing. And they didn't believe us. And initially, Department of Defense didn't want any imagery coming down at all because we were a top secret Department of Defense mission. And they finally said, okay, we'll let you send down encrypted video. Well, and as it turned out, apparently what happened on the ground was they looked at this video and the resolution was poor enough that they concluded that, nah, Hoot's all messed up. This isn't tile damage. It's just lighting and shadows that he's seeing. They never conveyed that message to us. They just came back a day later and said, it's not a problem. Come on back and land. And I said, what are you basing that on? and they had to get that answer from engineering. And the answer came back, it's no worse than what we've seen on other flights. Well, let the record show, no flight ever had 700 tiles damage except for us. And so I kind of gave in, and I said, okay, well, I've been here since before the first shuttle launch, and I've never seen anything like this before, but okay, you guys are the experts, but I didn't believe them. And the failure to communicate was on the mission control. If they had said what they really thought, we don't think you're seeing tile damage, is what they should have said, and they didn't. I was very clear when I said, we're seeing a lot of tile damage on the right wing. That's pretty darn clear. But they did not communicate. We were lucky because where we had one tile completely gone, there was a thicker plate in that location, which I understand had to do with the ground plane for the L-band antenna that was there. And that plate lasted long enough during the reentry. It had melted metal on the surface, but we didn't burn through. So we dodged a bullet. And if we had broken up like Columbia did, that would have been the end of us, but it would have been the end of the Space Shuttle program. Because this was only the second launch after the Challenger accident. The Congress and the White House would have said, we can't afford to keep doing this, so you guys are through. Park the rest of them in museums,
Right.
and that's it for the shuttle.
That just amazes me. There was a second flight after return to flight. This all could have happened to the program.
Yeah, and that would have been the end.
That was all from foam, is that right? Foam breaking off from the main
No,
engine?
it was the ablative coating on the right booster rocket nose cap
Oh, okay.
at maximum dynamic pressure, max Q, that came apart and showered our right wing with debris.
Okay.
And so that's what did all the tile damage.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, NASA never did anything to repair tile damage after that. The solution to the problem was they went to a stronger ablative on that nose cap. So throughout the shuttle program, we never had a tile repair kit or anything that would have helped us with what we saw on STS-27.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So-
you would have thought that after landing tile damage, that they would have figured out a way to, have a like a repair kit, right? That you do an EVA on and patch some of these holes. That was something that would last the reentry once.
And they had done some investigation on that and some testing, trying to see if we could inject some kind of putty in there that would solidify and harden. And I think it was just like the escape system. This is too difficult. So they never pressed on.
Came down to budgetary stuff, probably.
Probably budget as well, but
Well,
we
so,
never
yeah.
we never solved that problem.
Wow. Yeah. They did put an extension on the arm, I believe, right, to see further to underneath. And I remember there was one repair, if I remember correctly, I forgot which flight it was, but somebody pulled, there was some tile stuck between or something caught between tiles, and they did.
Yes, what you're thinking of is after the Columbia accident. They said, we want a way that we could get down there and look at things. And so they actually used the extension on the robot arm on a later mission to put a couple of the gap fillers back in place.
Okay.
And of course, all the tiles took up a certain amount of volume. But in between the tiles, there were some high temperature gap fillers, and some of those had come loose and were projecting. And so we put an astronaut on the end of that robot arm with the extension to where he could get out there and push the gap fillers back into place. So they did use that on a subsequent mission.
Well, getting back to the human side a little bit.
See, I told you. You give him an opportunity to ask a question about something tech, or he'll talk.
Well, we're all engineers here, right? So I think that we
Yeah, he's going to waste all our time talking about all this
your
technical
feelings.
stuff. Yeah.
At least you're not getting into the math yet. People don't want to hear math, so.
Well, you had also talked about something that was reoccurring to you after every mission. I thought that was pretty interesting, and about at the end of every mission, you can share that with us about how you felt. You felt that the thing that reoccurred to you during the time was that at the end of every mission, you felt.
Right. Well, yeah, the question had been, hey, is there a moment that you remember from your missions, a mission or all? And my answer had been that, yes, I'll never forget this. And it happened right at the very end of the flight, literally, as we were just coming to a stop on the ground. And of course, this followed a whole entire year of working and training together, getting ready to do the mission. Lots of time in the simulators and working on this. And then, after all of that full year of training, now we launch off into space, and there's a lot of work during the launch, a lot of work while you're up there. And then we're really busy during the re-entry and the landing. The braking profile is very demanding, and I had to apply the brakes just exactly the way that the engineers had specified, or we would destroy the tires and brakes. And we're at relatively heavy braking right as we come to a stop. But I'll never forget when we got to a dead stop, the nose strut is compressed because of the dynamics. And I'd come off the brakes, and the nose would make this little bobble up and then back down. And I'll never forget, I would turn around and look at my crew. I didn't say a word, but I would say to myself, wow, you guys, we did it. I'll never forget those moments, and I got to have 5 of those.
That's wonderful, yeah. 5 space shuttle flights. Well, now you're feeling about Artemis. I mean, this is pretty exciting, right? Just the other day, we watched a splashdown. We finally circled around, came back, we returned from the moon, and we've hasn't visited more than 50 years. What are both your feelings on that? On the Artemis mission and where we're going next?
It was extremely exciting. And I found myself feeling a little envious of those 4 other astronauts, saying, why didn't I get to do that? I had been asked many times, would you have liked to go to the moon, Hoot? And the answer was, yeah, I would have loved to have gone to the moon. It wasn't an option when I did it. And I guess I shouldn't keep being greedy, because I got to go to space 5 times. But yes, I would have loved to have been there. I was so excited by it, watching the launch and then watching the re-entry and the splashdown. Yeah. So exciting, and it was so rewarding to see the reaction of America to the fact that we had just done it.
Yeah. See, and for me, I've written a lot about the lessons learned from Apollo, right? I mean, but from an imagination perspective and creative innovations, so on and so forth. So I'm happy to see that we're back on a track where maybe we can get back into that swing again, where NASA is a leader in working with contractors to develop new technologies and things that will help us as a society, because a lot of products came out of Apollo, many thousands came out of Apollo that we take for granted every day. But everybody's always asked me over the years, how come we just don't how come we don't replicate Apollo again? I mean, why do we have to change everything? And I'm like, so yes, Hoot and I talked about that yesterday. Maybe today we talked about the whole parts of the Artemis parts shuttle, that we tested technology, so that's all good. But the part about the Artemis landing that we talked about that kind of stuck with me was, there's one thing NASA hasn't changed, the whole helicopter lift thing, off the raft. And I'm like, why are you doing that with 4 helicopters and 4? I mean, why can't you just put them in the boat and take the boat? Because the Navy's got ships where you just drive right inside the ship, right? So why are we doing all that? Is it for drama? I mean, because it's like, it's not necessary.
It's interesting. People who talked to me when they were watching it, people that don't know much about this stuff, and they said the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, what do we need all this to do that for?
I understand the frogmen, needing 20 frogmen to put the raft around. I understand all this, but it's like, and then people are like, well, then I heard a response on social media. It's like, well, then they can't be on, because if you take them inside the ship, they're not on the deck. It's like, well, if it's important for them to be on the deck, take them all the way to San Diego then, right? And land them right there in a parking lot or something. I mean, it's like, why? I don't know. But again, it's exciting to me that if nothing else, it's inspiring young people again. Because I saw that a lot this past week, how young people are getting excited about space again. And that's what's been missing. I mean, right. SpaceX has done a great job. It's, because they're a marketing machine, right? They've done a great job getting people back that wow factor. Yeah. But this really inspired young people, and people are really excited about the fact that humans are now traveling in space again. Yeah. So. Yeah, and I have to agree. If it was done for drama and it makes it more exciting, then great, right?
people
It's
like
also
going to
risky
the movies.
though too.
It is very risky.
There's a lot of risk in
Some
that.
additional risk.
Yeah,
Jerry-
nothing like getting a crew back from the moon to have them have a problem on the Earth, right?
Jerry Griffin is texting me on the phone saying, "Hey, this mission is not over till they're on the deck and they're safe." That
Right.
comes from that comes from a controller,
Right.
And so yeah, but most people think, "Oh, they've landed. This is great. We're good." There's still risk involved.
But again, during the Apollo days, if I remember correctly from thinking back, is they had one helicopter and they kept lowering the basket down one at a time, right? Put them all in the same helicopter and took one helicopter back, and they all came out of the helicopter. Why four? I mean, let's magnify this with four separate helicopters. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, the great thing is, like you said, we're all excited. Here at NEAF, since COVID, I haven't seen this much excitement, which is
Right.
great. And it was wonderful how it happened here,
Right.
during
The
the
timing was fortuitous this year on a variety of fronts. NEAF, all these books we have coming out with astronauts,
Right.
I planned that, by the way. I knew NASA's schedule. No, I'm kidding. It's just lucky because I honestly didn't think we'd be flying Artemis yet. I thought that Artemis II at least. I thought it might be another year yet before we get to this. So I wasn't even thinking about this at the
Right.
time. So it worked out very nicely for us. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your, all your adventures and getting to Hoot to write the book,
Yeah.
which is really good.
Well, you did a great
but,
job.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a while, and glad you came, and hope you come again.
Yeah, thank
We
you.
agree. It's been a
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
It's been a good time.